Amongst the more powerful features of Foundry is the ability to download and run published software on your own computer or cloud environment. Now, it's not always going to be available for every product tile that you see listed in Foundry, but when it is, it's immensely powerful because it allows you to connect to your own local data sources that may be behind a firewall, or load your own data that you can't necessarily populate into a public reference implementation that's hosted and shared amongst other people on the internet. So to get started here, I'm going to load up foundry.hl7.org and show an example of running the burden reduction solution bundle, which by itself is not an implementation guide, but is actually a collection of other implementation guides that we've pre-wired into one simple package that you can download and start up, and then kind of use that as a launching point for your own Fire adoption or testing activities. So if you load up Foundry here, you are going to have to log in. So you'll have a login button in the corner and log in with your HL7 account, which is free. If you don't see Burdens Reduction Solution Bundle on the home page, you can go ahead and search for it here in the search box. I'm going to go ahead and click this. Now, once you're logged in, whether you're logged in or not, you'll see some basic descriptive text here on not only burden reduction, but every other solution product that's listed within Foundry. So for burden reduction, we have some general descriptive text, which really just says that this is a collection of other software and isn't itself a piece of software, but really a configuration of other things that have been pre-integrated together for your convenience. If I scroll down here and look at bundled products, you're going to see what's actually going to come with the burden reduction bundle. There is a whole bunch of stuff within that, and then you may also there may also be some products that are included due to Foundry's transitive dependency resolution process. So if some of these reference implementations require other things under the covers, Foundry will take care of resolving those and making sure that they get pre-wired appropriately when you just download this entire bundle for yourself. So I'm going to skip some steps here for the sake of keeping a demo short. There are a couple prerequisites the first time you do this within Foundry. For our demos, we typically use Docker Desktop. You do not have to use Docker Desktop. You can use Podman Desktop, you can use Kubernetes, really any sort of container runtime that you're comfortable with. But everything that you're able to download within Foundry is going to be containerized. So if you're not comfortable with that, we also have tutorials to kind of get you up to speed. But if you haven't used containers before, Docker Desktop is probably the easiest way to get started, and that's a free download. In addition to that, burden reduction requires a special JSON file for authorization purposes, which is going to have a default username and password embedded in it. We'll get to that in a second. As well as a VSAC or Value Set Authority Center API key. That's free. Unfortunately, we have no way of bundling an API key for you into the generated package. So you need to agree to that UMLS license yourself and get that API key. It should only take you a few minutes. And that's a very common thing anytime you're using a terminology server like VSAC to look things up. I believe CRD internally uses a VSAC API key to load value sets, which is why this is required for burden reduction. Okay, so once you have your VSAC API key handy, you have either Docker or a suitable container runtime environment installed. Typically what you're going to want to do, whether it's burden reduction or something else, is go over to the configuration wizard here. If the product, such as burden reduction, supports the ability to download and run for yourself, you're going to first select a suitable build. In this case, we're using just kind of the latest available version. Some are going to have multiple named versions. It's kind of up to the developer how they version their software. So in this case, we only have a latest build. We've put together a default solution bundle configuration, and you're going to have two buttons in this case. This big green button is going to be always available for downloadable things called Download Stack with Defaults, and that is really the configuration of every piece of software that you need to run the entire suite of use cases. In addition to that, there's one extra configuration file that one of those services needs, so I'm going to click that as well, and that's going to download to my local computer. All right, so now that I have those two download, I've just put those in my downloads folder. You can put them wherever you want, but they do need to be in the same directory. I'm going to go back to my instructions here, and because the VSAC key is enabled, there is one kind of prerequisite step of setting that. There's three ways of doing that on your local computer. I happen to be on Mac OS. Really, it just comes down to setting an environment variable if you know how to do that. Alternatively, if you don't want to mess with the command line, you can really just open this .yaml file or .yml file and set your VSAC API key as a line in that file, and that's effectively the same thing, and we'll do that. So once you have done those steps, you can go to the command line here and run the command as provided in the instructions. And I'm going to let this run. It's going to take a couple minutes. What it's going to do is it's going to download the current copies of every service that's required. Once it has all of those, it's going to spin them up in their pre-integrated manner. It will take a couple minutes for them to simply start because it is probably half dozen services or so. And in addition to that, the CRD server has to look up some value sets online. So you will have to have an internet connection to do this with that working VSAC API key. I'm going to let this go for a couple minutes and be right back. Okay, we're back. It looks like the CRD server has finished loading all of its VSAC value sets using our API key. So now that that's started, we're going to go back to our instructions tab here. We've set our VSAC API key. We've started things up. And it's telling us to open a browser and navigate to the CRD request generator at localhost 3000. So I'm going to open that in a new tab here. And I've memorized all these instructions, so I won't go back to this, but you can consult that at any time. So now we have our CRD request generator running on our local machine on port 3000 here. Per the instructions, I'm going to go ahead and select a patient. And before I do that, I'm going to open a developer console, which any developer is going to want to do to kind of see what's going on here as well. I'm going to patient select, and I'm going to look for a patient 015, and I'm going to choose a request for an E0250 hospital bed device right here. I'm going to click somewhere else in this row just to close the dialog box, and it looks like it's pre-populated that. The instructions tell us now to click the Submit to CRD and Display Cards button. So we're going to go ahead and submit that. I'm going to wait a second for it to return. It looks like it has returned right here. And then we can also see the various API calls it's made to our local server here. So as a developer, we're going to want to look at all of that juicy data to figure out what's going on. The instructions say now that we have that card, we're going to go ahead and click the order form here to get to the documentation template. And it says we have a default username of user, a default password of password. I'll sign in. Now, while that's loading, we'll see we're loading localhost port 3005, and this is actually a different service. And so now in that little exchange of logging in and redirecting here to this questionnaire, what happened is that the authorization process was a different service that was pre-wired in automatically, and now we have our order form, which is also a different app. The instructions say to fill this out. I'm going to just kind of put in some random values here. It doesn't really matter in my case. Put that in. And then I'm going to click Proceed to Prior Auth right there. I'm going to leave this as its default. This is localhost 9015, which is the prior auth server. I'll click Submit, and it responds with a claim response. So now we've gone through kind of the trifecta of CRD, DTR, and PAS. And I will stop the demo there. Thank you.